Good morning. Is everybody awake? Have we had our coffee? Yeah, good. Cheers. Okay, so collaboration, it's a key component of Agile development, right? One of its greatest challenges, yeah, hallelujah from the front. One of its greatest challenges occurs when part of your team is located somewhere else, or perhaps even offshore. So your three amigos, that's your BA, your developer, your tester, or people representing those roles, are separated. So my name is Michele Playfair. My co-presenter, Donella Fardoulis, and I work together at Sandstones Technology, and they're a fintech company that specialises in digital banking and product origination systems. In this presentation, we're going to discuss some techniques you can try with your team to improve trust and communication and collaborate more effectively regardless of your geographic location. So Sandstones' main office is in Sydney. It also has another large office in Manila and some other smaller offices in the UK, Melbourne, Singapore, Hong Kong. Most of our teams followed some variation of an Agile Scrum development process, while also being geographically separated, mostly between the Sydney and the Manila office. And as we all know, and it's generally agreed, the best way to communicate and work with your team is to be co-located and have face-to-face conversations, or according to Alastair Coburn, specifically face-to-face around a whiteboard. Yeah, that's a really nice idea in theory. You can't always get what you want. So who here is working with some kind of a distributed team? Show of hands. Leave your hand up if some of your colleagues are offshore. Yep, good, quite a few. So you guys know what I'm talking about when we say we have to develop some really effective ways to work with our colleagues offshore. I think communication is part of the way to get there, but it also depends, particularly in this scenario when you're dealing with the onshore-offshore, you really need to understand the cultural context of the people you're working with. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some theoretical stuff around cross-cultural communication, specifically between Australia and the Philippines, because that was our context. I think there's some similarities, perhaps, working with Australia and maybe India or Vietnam or kind of other Asian countries. Donnie is going to talk through a specific example of how she used the principles that I'm going to talk about in working with her team to build some shared understanding using the collaborative technique of story mapping. So when you're working with an offshore team, cultural differences is something that everyone's aware of, but probably doesn't spend too much time specifically focusing on. Oh yeah, different language, different customs, whatever. There's kind of an unwritten expectation that your offshore staff is just going to have to adjust and deal with the onshore rather than the other way around. So I'm going to talk a little bit about culture. So there's a bit of a danger in discussing cultures that aren't yours. So these observations aren't supposed to be any criticism or good or bad. It's just some information that I used and my teams started to use to kind of learn how to work better and adjust our approach as onshore staff while working with our offshore team. These little graphs are from the Hofstetter Center. They do a lot of research and provide tools that help you visualize cultural differences and their impact, and they have this 6-dimensional model. And each little graph represents preferences for one state of affairs over another at a whole country level, not individual people. So obviously there's differences in individuals. You can actually buy other tools. This is free. You can buy tools that help you work out what your preferences would be relating to your culture or any other country as well. So I was obviously looking at the Philippines versus Australia, and I found the biggest differences that related to what I was looking at in a work context were power distance and individualism. So those are the two that you can see on the left. So power distance is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country kind of expect and accept that there's going to be a hierarchy. And the power is going to be distributed unequally, and you'll have a boss, and your boss will have a boss, and everybody knows their little place in the food chain, and they're all kind of cool with that. So the Philippines is considered to be hierarchical because they are generally accepting of that, whereas Australia has a lot less formal hierarchy. We probably have a boss, but we'd kind of expect that there'd be a bit more consultative with us. And we don't really focus so much on what your level is. So for example, in the testing group that I worked with, we had 4 different levels, or 5 if you include managers, whereas in Australia we sort of tended to have maybe 1 or 2. You might be a junior, say junior developer, and then you'd be a senior. There wasn't quite so many levels and ladders. The second one that's quite interesting is individualism and interdependence. So the Philippines here is considered to be a collectivist society. They're a lot more interested in the group rather than in the individual itself. So how that translates into work is in Australia, you're supposed to be self-reliant. You know, you're supposed to be display initiative and come in and kind of look after yourself. Whereas in the Philippines, it's expected that the group is going to look after you a lot more. And it's a lot more dealing sort of towards loyalty. And this I found to be really quite interesting because I did have a lot of, you know, I guess this is one of those aha moments, because I did have a lot of thoughts about why, you know, those people over there seem to not have any initiative compared to what I would have expected. And when I found this, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I get it now. It's just a different way of looking at things. The next thing this kind of leads on to is how trust is formed in different cultures. I got this from the Harvard Business Review, but I added the cute little pictures. So cognitive trust is based on your intellectual factors. So you respect someone because they know their stuff. Whereas affective is based on relationships that are built by shared experiences, emotional closeness, and empathy. So if you kind of map the Hofstetter model countries into this type of graph, I saw a definite correlation between high individualism and cognitive trust and low with the affective trust. So if you think about trust, in cultures like Australia, a lot of the things that would build effective trust are considered to be a bit unprofessional. Like, oh my God, you're friends with your team on Facebook. That's just a bit weird. So it kind of, how we like to work actually builds a barrier, a trust barrier with some of our offshore colleagues. And this is the world according to Stephen Covey. I don't know if it makes it easy, instant, and effective, but easier, faster, and more effective. So what we really need to do is build up our trust account with our team, and that'll in turn help communication, and we need to do all that while working at a distance. So easy, right? We know that communication is a challenge. Time, language, culture, technology. This is a pretty well-known observation. It's got information from Alastair Coburn and Scott Ambler. The real thing that I like to point to is this. Persistence required all the time, not just in online chat. You really have to work at this stuff. My personal theory is if you're working in Scrum, that's one of the jobs of your Scrum Master. That's one of the barriers that they have to work on. Someone needs to champion communication. We all think it's something that just happens. It's not. You have to work. And one of the things you might consider, and Donnie's going to touch on this, is where is your Scrum Master? Are they onshore or are they offshore? Maybe if you put them with the offshore team, that could help. This is an observation from Alastair Coburn. Again, expensive. It's effort, not just money. So in reality, hard work's required. And one of the things we found as some specific techniques like story mapping, example mapping, and other kind of frameworks really provide a beneficial structure to help keep that communication focused. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Donnie.
Thank you, Michele. Hello, everyone. So I work, microphone. I work as a BA in a software development team of about 14 people across 2 different offices. So our product owner, BAs, developers are located in Sydney, while our Scrum Master and our testing team are located in Manila. We recently started a 3-month software development cycle focused on the redesign of one of our existing products. This time we decided to approach things differently and employ some the Agile technique of user story mapping, which was formulated by Jeff Patton. So, excuse me. At a simplistic level in a software development context, story mapping is a collaborative technique which helps to facilitate the creation of user stories, develop a shared understanding amongst the team, focus the team on the big picture, determine scope, and schedule development, amongst many other things. It's usually best performed at the beginning of a project, and participants usually include stakeholders such as product owners, analysts, testers, developers, UXers, but most importantly of all, but hardest to actually get to attend, is users of the proposed system. So essentially, story mapping is done by defining a high-level goal or activity and brainstorming a bunch of related tasks to that activity. These similar tasks are then grouped into categories, which are then arranged into a logical sequence of steps. So essentially the goal or the activity is what the software or software component is designed to achieve. The set of steps is your backbone or your user journey, and the tasks become the user stories which form the building blocks of your software development. So that's essentially story mapping in a nutshell. So the team, the team had worked together prior to this software development cycle, so a certain level of trust and familiarity had already been established amongst the team. Even so, with the introduction of something new, it can often be met by a healthy dose of skepticism and sometimes even resistance. So combined with our cultural and geographical challenges, I anticipated that the adoption and practice of this story mapping wouldn't necessarily be an easy thing. Today, I'd like to share with you our experience of this collaborative process. It's my hope that if any of you find yourself in a similar situation, facing similar challenges, that you might be able to take some ideas away from our discussion today. So, in order to promote an environment in which this practice would have the best chance of success, I tried to minimise the negative impact of these challenges by taking into account 3 broad things which I'll discuss with you today. So firstly, preparation. So this is how I primed the team and tried to get them excited about what we were going to do. Secondly, inclusion. This is how we tried to create an environment in which everyone felt that they could contribute. And thirdly, transmission. So this is where we tried to document our collective brain dumps, essentially. So before we started story mapping in earnest, I ran an icebreaker activity to help demystify the process and familiarise the team with story mapping. I can't take the credit for this activity, however, I did steal it from Jeff Patton's book, User Story Mapping. So essentially, Manila and Sydney mapped out their morning routines against the goal of getting out the door in the morning. So everyone wrote down the tasks that they performed from when they woke up to when they arrived at work. We arranged similar tasks into groups and then arranged those into chronological order to show our user journey. The activity seemed to go down really well. There was a lot of laughter. It was quite entertaining. I remember comments such as, "You do that in the morning?" no one says the word ablutions anymore. And I definitely can't leave the house without going to the toilet first. Definite MVP. So, sharing intimate details of our morning routines actually brought us closer together. And as cliched as it sounds, I think it really strengthened our team bonds. So following this workshop, I felt a greater anticipation of and commitment to the idea of story mapping. So, however, while it seemed everyone had accepted the idea, some were a little bit hesitant at actually contributing. One of the most important aspects of story mapping is its collaborative nature. Crucial to its success is the participation of everyone involved, as everyone can bring their unique viewpoint to the process. It's more likely that gaps will be covered and the likelihood of the software being fit for purpose will increase. During the first few sessions, I noticed that Manila were a little bit shy at contributing their ideas and opinions. Sydney tended to dominate the conversation. I really wanted to avoid an us and them mentality and ensure that everyone could contribute as much as possible. I knew I needed to change tact. A few months ago, our Manila-based QA team lead became our Scrum Master. Since then, I noticed that our Manila friends had participated a lot more in our sprint and retrospective meetings. With this in mind, I decided to equip Jericho, our Scrum Master, with the skills necessary to lead some of the sessions. It was my intention to better distribute the balance of power, and I felt this could be achieved with a facilitator with whom our Manila friends could better relate. And it also helps that he works on site in the same office with them as well. I also asked Jericho whether he could elicit some feedback which we could use to better inform our approaches. Jericho's since run a few sessions. He started just with the test team by themselves and then opened it up to the rest of the team. It's taken a little while, but we're now starting to see a bit of a shift. Manila are feeling more and more confident and starting to contribute more. So it feels like we're on our way to achieving a greater level of equality around our collaborative efforts. And this is actually our testing team in Manila. High-fiving. So it seems that we've got the human element on track. But what about the fact that our offices are distributed some 6,264 kilometres apart? Roundabout. In terms of communication, we had a little issue. Manila are all fluent in English, and they're only 2 hours behind us, 3 hours in daylight savings, which is not too bad, except sometimes we tend to schedule meetings over each other's lunchtimes, unfortunately, but it's not a bad issue, not a terrible issue. We did face issues, however, when it came to documenting and maintaining our story map in a way that was accessible to everyone. An interesting feature of story mapping is the ease with which it can be undertaken. Essentially, all you really need is like a big wall, a big desk, some index cards, post-it notes, Sharpies, texters, pens. That's all you really need. The low fidelity nature of the practice makes it really easy to quickly jot down your ideas and arrange them in a way that everyone can see and it's accessible to everyone. Unfortunately, in a distributed context, the benefits of lo-fi are lost. So we had to get creative. For our first session, we tried replicating the cards at both ends, so in Sydney and Manila. This was great because everyone could just scribble their ideas, get them down, arrange them. That was awesome. But because of the duplication at both ends, it became really cumbersome trying to keep them synchronised at both ends. For our second session, we just tried using the cards at one end, and Manila would look on through the webcam. So this addressed the problem of the previous approach in that cards were only kept in one place, but it meant that Manila couldn't contribute, and it kind of tipped the balance of power in Sydney's favour, kind of undermined the collaborative nature of the process. For our third session, we tried out a tool called Real-Time Board. So Real-Time Board is, by its own accounts, an online whiteboard created as a team collaboration and brainstorming tool for Agile teams. So Real-Time Board was great because it addressed all the shortcomings of the previous processes up to a point. We were only using a trial version, so only 3 people could edit it at one time. We will continue to use Real-Time Board, but my story mapping utopia is one in which there's electronic whiteboards in all offices. They're kept on at the same time, they're kept on all the time. They display the story map constantly. It's accessible to everyone, and the story map can then be updated with progress. And because it's on all the time, people can see are reminded every day of how far they've come, which tends to help motivate the team. So this is our full team. Story mapping is a valuable and beneficial tool which I highly recommend you use to help bring your 3 Amigos together. While using it within a distributed team with cultural diversity can have its challenges, with a few tweaks here and there, a good outcome can actually be achieved. The icebreaker activity is a really great way of introducing story mapping to people and inspiring confidence in the process. Creating an environment in which people feel connected, comfortable and respected to help promote inclusion and participation, which is really key in collaboration. There are quite a few free and subscription-based collaborative tools out there which can serve as really valuable communication mediums. Hopefully this presentation and discussion has given you some ideas of how to use cultural context, communication and collaboration to improve your working relationship with your remote colleagues. Thank you.
Who's got questions? Or maybe a story that you would like to share of something that you've tried working with your offshore colleagues?
More of a question around the language differences. Something that I've noticed working in English-speaking countries is that most people only speak one language, whilst if you go outside of your typical English-speaking countries, people speak multiple languages, and it's more expected that multiple languages are being spoken. So how did you find that, we talk about power bases and things like that, how do you find, or how did you overcome the natural power base that's being or that's there just based on language? Because obviously you work with a team that has multiple languages. Many people in the Philippines speak 3, 4, 5 languages versus people in English-speaking countries like Australia who speak 1. So how did that impact your working relationship, and how did that impact the power bases as well?
We sort of speak English, I think.
A version there,
yeah, right? I think we're kind of lucky because one of the hiring requirements for that office is to be fluent in English. However, Australian is something different again. And one thing that we've found is that's part of the trust thing as well, because we do, and I'm especially guilty of this, use a lot of colloquialisms, and it gets to the point where the team feels brave enough to say, you know what, I don't even know what you're saying just now.
I was actually more interested in the opposite, because again, we have this expectation of you'll speak English because you have to. I'm standing up straight away. I'm not an English native speaker. This is my second language. I do speak more than one. And there's an expectation that everyone who works with English-speaking countries will speak English, will speak up, will improve their English. We never have an expectation the other way around. We never have a team in Manila working with a team in Australia saying, do you know what, how about you learn our language?
Indeed.
How about
No.
There you go. But yeah, so did that actually come up as a suggestion? Did you learn a little bit each way?
That is probably something that I would think should be done. To be honest, that wasn't the top of my list, but I know I personally did learn some, which actually was really quite well received, and I had lots of volunteer coaches to help me with my atrocious pronunciation. But yeah, I think that really helps, and it's like when you travel, you go to another country, you learn, 27 words. So yeah, I totally agree with you that really, really helps. It's one of the things, language, food, it just brings people together. So yeah, I didn't address that, but it should be on the list there somewhere.
But but you're very right, and I have thought about that before. Something I wanted to start at work was maybe just a few sessions where, and we've really culturally diverse, not just across, the Philippines. We've got a lot of, we've got Israelis, we've got Chinese, we've got Indians, we've got so many different people working in Polish in our office that I thought maybe, we could have like a half an hour session with them, and they could like just teach us some of their phrases so that we can start using those around the office, just to, kind of, make them feel like it's not all about English, and kind of tip the balance a bit. So yeah, it's something I'd like to do.
Hi. So when working with distributed teams, you've got to do a lot of investments in technology. Were there any barriers from the organization saying, it's getting too expensive, you're not going to be investing in online tools, you've got to do via conference calls? Did you have any of those barriers?
That was the part where Donnie said we were stuck with the trial version of real-time board. There is a lot of that, and I think even just country infrastructure as well. Like, I think it's quite possible that we do have the best internet connection available from Manila. But yeah, that's part of the ongoing difficulty, and that's why, we keep trying different things. That didn't work. A webcam didn't work. Let's try a tool. Oh, it's a trial version. What else is there? So yeah. Even in companies with stacks of cash, I think that's still a problem.
Got another one over here.
Cheers. I'm a big stats person. I'd like to know if there are any measurements or metrics that can demonstrate the improvements that you've taken. So what have you done from an analysis perspective?
We haven't really formalised that. It's more just by observation,
Sure.
I go on the very, very basic stat where you see people going like this, or like this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's a Spotify metric, isn't it?
I've got one question. When working with distributed teams, like let's say 10 and you have 3 offshore team members, is there anything that you do to keep connected? Like sometimes it's like out of sight, out of mind sometimes. So is there anything that you do to keep the team bonding and stuff?
I guess we connect, through our formal meetings, sprint reviews, retrospectives, and daily stand-ups. Sometimes they have sent our colleagues over to Sydney and vice versa, which really helps because you get to know them more as people, not just as colleagues and not just like faces on a screen as well. And also we try and kind of, we're friends with some of our team, Manila teammates on Facebook. And you try and develop kind of a bit of a personal relationship with them too. So over Instant Messenger, you kind of talk to them about stuff other than work. So, yeah.
For me, Facebook is the most wildly underrated team building tool ever, because it was unprofessional, so I didn't want to friend people. But it's just, hey, that looked like a really great spot you went to on the weekend. When you're doing the chat, tell me more about that. Oh, your kid's so cute. What a great birthday party. It's really that sort of water cooler chat you don't have. So if people feel comfortable doing that with their offshore team, I find it really helpful.
Any more? Oh, we've got one at the front.
So I just wanted to share something that we've been doing in our distributed team. We're completely distributed. Everyone's everywhere all the time. And on the product side of it, we do a daily retrospective, like just 10 or 15 minutes at the end of the day, where we write it up in a single document inside the source code repository, which goes through the day. But the thing that I think is really good about that is the very first thing we do is we ask everyone how they're feeling about the day, and we record how people are feeling. Sometimes people say, I'm feeling rubbish. It's nothing to do with the day's work. It's just because I've got stuff going on at home. But just having that space where you get used to sharing how you're feeling with your team all the time is a really helpful way of building those things. Like you said, sharing personal details is really important to actually bonding with people.
One of the things I wanted to share was how we bond with people at our workplace. Though we are not highly distributed, but since we are in a common workplace, we often make emojis out of people and make their faces. And that's the way we kind of upvote each other or say something that is more meaningful. So instead of 10 sentences, we could just create an emoji and upvote on it. That creates a totally different effect.
We've got from
Yeah.
Tim. So thank you, everybody.